also known as MJ Bellotti. Thank you so much for joining us. And MJ, of course, looks after lots of members. And what does trust mean in the context of an organization that has got a lot of innovation in mind? Then next, Super Retail Group. Super Retail Group with multiple heads was the main contributor to our paper. I'm totally delighted with an equally exciting title. The General Manager Omni Digital, Brian Townsend, who will join us here on stage. And Nadine talks about Omni Trust, Omni Digital, and the interplay between convenience and trust will be interesting to unpack with you. And last but not least, the mastermind behind everything you can see here, Reg Johnson. Reg Johnson is the Director Education Strategic Industries ANZ. And you would sit somewhere else tonight without Reg. Reg created the National Industry Innovation Network, of which QT is a proud part. So first of all, thank you so much that you donate tonight, but even more, thank you so much for what you've done over the last years. We look forward to your contribution as part of this panel. Nadine, back to you.
Oh yeah, welcome Reg, Brian, and MJ. It's a delight to welcome you here to QT and that you talk with us today about benevolence. So for me, benevolence is really a fascinating topic because it's so important, it's so vital to do good for your customer, but still we know so little. And that's why we're here today. And I would like to kickstart our conversation with the first question. And I know it's hard because I want to give you the opportunity to tell the great things you are, but please put this into a nutshell. I would like to know, how is benevolence viewed in your organization? What's the priority? And also, how does your trust journey look over the next few years to come in your organization? And maybe I can ask MJ, as the Chief Purpose Officer, with a very exciting title, to start and kick off this question.
Thank you, Nadine. Firstly, RACQ, I'm sure many of you have used our services. Fantastic. We have about 1.8 million members in Queensland. It's a privilege to actually steward a brand that is probably one of Australia's most trusted brands. It comes with it a lot of pressure to make sure we keep it there. It's been in play for about 120 years, and one of the things that I think has helped us gain the trust that we have with a lot of our members is what we call the yellow truck feeling. If any of you have ever been stuck at the side of the road, as I have, when the yellow truck arrives, you feel very grateful that a heroic guy comes out and changes the tire or the battery, or gives you petrol, in my case. So this is something of an organization that I think over many, many, many years has really helped members when they need us most. And I extend that to insurance. You know, if anyone was caught up in the February floods or has experienced a cyclone, you know, these are moments that matter. And we don't get it 100% right, let's be clear. It's tough, there are times we get it wrong. But there is an organizational culture within RACQ that I would say to you as a mutual, it really does help us be a little bit different in the way that we show up. We don't have shareholders, so this conversation around, you know, you're driven by profit, you're making trade-offs, that's not our narrative. Our narrative is very much about showing up for members. We are there for members, we exist for members, and we really understand that while we don't always get it right, the question for us that's on our mind is, what is the voice of the member? Are they happy today? Are we doing good things for them? Our vision is to help them in what I believe will be the biggest transition we all face, and that is, how do we transition to electric vehicles? How do we decarbonize transport? And how does a motoring club show up in that conversation? And then the bigger interest for me in the next few years is a really interesting question. It's the opportunity space you mentioned, Nadine. How does a brand like RACQ, who is so trusted, how can I stretch the brand into spaces that are perhaps less trusted? And can I move into energy? And we bought a solar energy company last year because there's such a fragmented industry there, and the energy sector in itself is not very trusted. And so now I'm going, okay, is this an opportunity for us to move into the energy space around renewables? So EVs, renewable energy, and can we drive our brand into new spaces? And the trust that we have, I think, is going to get very exciting for RACQ. I'll stop there because I'll keep talking.
Very good. So firstly, thank you for inviting me. Great to be here. Fantastic topic. So certainly within Super Retail Group, Rebel, Supercheap Auto, BCF, Macpac, most of you are probably shopped in one of those brands, if not more. We have a formal ESG strategy, as you'd expect, for an ASX listed company. People and planet are the primary drivers within that. I think what's come through this work though is actually there's a lot of informal work that happens here, and I think this will drive us to actually formalise it and standardise it, because actually we want people to do good, absolutely, within the stores, the store manager. One of our big things is we want to help you catch the fish you want, we don't want to sell you the rod. So actually, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve? How do we help you with that mission? And how do we, as we phrase it, win the customer, not win the sale? If you win the customer, then you're off. Get a transaction today, you might hit this quota, but you've got to have a longer term horizon. And that's kind of in our DNA, which is really important for us. But then equally, with 700 plus stores, and retail is a fairly high churn from a team member perspective, how do you standardise that? How do you actually, when the 18-year-old is working over Christmas, how's he trained, how's she trained, empowered to do good? So I think the journey that we've got, I think it complements the ESG. Absolutely, we've got to anchor on our members, of which we've got about 10 million. So big member base. If you're in that, you get a lot of benefit. But actually, how do we formalise what is currently informal, is my take out of what we've talked about so far.
Thanks, Brian. And big thank you to QUT, and congratulations on the paper and this amazing initiative in terms of professionalisation of trust. So I would think most people in the room hopefully would have a reasonable idea about Cisco and who we are, but I mean, in terms of associated with building the internet, which seems a long time ago now, but we're now sort of probably tasked with a greater challenge around securing that as well. But I think in terms of this topic and thinking about it from a point of view of organisational culture, which we live and breathe every day, and the importance of that in terms of empowering your staff. As a business-to-business organisation, I think, you know, and 70,000+ people globally working for Cisco, we have an amazing sort of, I guess, asset in our people, and recognising that. And what we've seen over recent years is the rise around the importance of trust in terms of, I guess, our people, and certainly as everyone moved to working from home, that trust really got extended, and I guess organisations didn't have any real choice. But one of the things that Cisco's done in terms of its vision around an inclusive future for all is clearly recognising the power of technology for good. And it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to do it. And one of the things that, as an organisation that Cisco has done now is, in terms of benevolence, is provided a global policy around time to give. So every employee globally gets allowed 10 days of paid leave to do what they may want to do in their community, whether it's a charity, but certainly in terms of giving back. So I think we've gone beyond the corporate social responsibility and even beyond ESG now in terms of really having a clear purpose as an organisation. And, you know, it's great to, you know, believe that in terms of work gives you a purpose, but more importantly, I think if your work has a real purpose, that's really powerful. And I think, you know, in terms of really empowering your people and your culture, I think that's probably a big, you know, asset in terms of what you can unlock in terms of that potential.
Thank you so much. That was very inspiring, and I think you're already a role model in doing good for the customer. However, we heard strategies that Michael presented, and there are much more in the paper. But what I would be interested in, when you heard of strategies, how useful are they to your business, and what do you think are the biggest challenges in implementing those benevolent strategies? And may I start with Brian, maybe, leading a multi-brand company adds maybe additional challenges to that. So what's your take on this question?
So yeah, it's definitely challenging working with multiple brands, but that's a completely another panel and half an hour conversation. But actually, Andre, one of my colleagues who works within Supertube Auto, has been part of this work, and he actually was really articulate in saying, actually, what are the common scenarios, and if, for example, a customer has clicked and collect the wrong wipers for their car, they've taken them home, they've gone to try and fit them, they don't work, or they don't fit, and then they come back. How do we show up then? How do we handle that? And it's empathy, really sorry that's happened. We've got loads of tools to make sure you get the right wipers, so we're sorry. It's a pain that you've had to come back, so acknowledgement, and actually let's upgrade those for you and we'll fit them for you while you're here. So very specific use case that Andre has identified through this, and we've trialled it in a few stores, which is what we do. Right, where do we trial? What do we learn? How do we then scale it? So one small example, of which there was about 10, so to my point around formalising, we're on that journey. And as within the group level, we often trial something in one brand, see what works, refine it, and then start to scaling it. So as a concept, we're getting all of our different stakeholders on board, we're shining a light on the work. And equally, what we're seeing is it's having a positive effect, obviously, on the customer, but it's actually having a really positive impact on our team members as well. So actually, it's not only about empowering and kind of trying to retain that customer and build that relationship, it's how do we actually build a stronger relationship with our team members so they become engaged. So the challenge then is that formalisation, scaling it and rolling it out and driving consistency. Consistency is key. You walk into McDonald's, you order a Big Mac and fries, you know what you're going to get. How do we actually get to that level of consistency across all of our brands in all of those different scenarios? That's the nutshell.
Challenge, and I'll just share it openly with you, and it's something we haven't cracked yet. So we have a loyalty program, and you have to be with us for 50 years to get the really good benefits. And they're really good. But that's a challenge. So our Gold 50 members who've been with us for a really long time get enormous discounts because we value that tenure, we value that loyalty. So you go Gold 50, you go Gold, you go Silver, you go Bronze, you go Blue. And we have this loyalty scheme. But you know, as I've come into the organization, I look at it from an equity perspective and go, well, how does that work for a new member? So now we're in this really interesting place where the good that we thought we designed probably doesn't have fair equity. So we're really trying to understand that. So that's a challenge we have. We have a value called generosity of spirit. And I'll just share this really simple story because it's beautiful, but it gives you the essence of our challenge. So someone on an older person on a mobility scooter would call us, and we don't have a product for that. It's a mobility scooter, right? And people would call us and say, I'm stuck, something's happened. So our guys go, no problem, let's say yes. And we show up. The problem is that was increasing because mobility scooters are actually getting really popular. And when I went to capture it in our For the Greater Good report, my eyes watered at how much money that was costing us. And on one hand, it's beautiful and it's benevolent and it's fantastic and it's commercially unviable. So then we had to come to a place to say, okay, well, if this is actually a growing need, how do we create a very affordable product? And how do we continue to show up and do good, but at the same time recognize there's a cost to do this? So it's finding, that's a challenge. It's this balance for us. So I just thought I'd add another layer.
Yeah, so hearing the cost challenge, one solution that we always think about as researchers, of course, exploiting technologies to improve benevolence. And Reg, as a part of a multinational tech company, the question is, what do you think, how much would it extend and how could technology improve, assist, or even leverage benevolence in the future?
Yeah, and perhaps part of that too is around the that balancing between profit and purpose. And I think, you know, the whole notion of technology for good. So, I mean, as we've sort of seen around supply chain and the challenges that that's presented, and in part, I mean, thinking about and the circular economy is sort of one of the focus areas that we have in terms of that whole sustainability of supply chain. And of course, at the end of the day, that more predictable supply chain and reliable supply chain means that, you know, organisational profits are enhanced through ability to deliver product on time and keep that commitment and that trust within customers, where we're committing to lead times associated with that. So I think from my point of view, it's been interesting to observe, particularly over the last few years, this rise around in organisations around their purpose. And clearly we have responsibility in terms of shareholders and to report profits, but I think, you know, what we're seeing is that impact on brand in terms of being clearly associated to having a clear purpose and giving back as an organisation and what that can contribute to.
Thank you so much. Before we open the floor for a question from the audience, maybe a question for each and one of us, because we heard about the purpose and also the costs of benevolence. Maybe can you tell us more about what are, from your experience, the largest cost drivers of benevolence, but also the return on benevolence that you see in your organization? Maybe we have an example for us on those two aspects.
Yeah, well, I've got the mic, so I can start first. So, I mean, I'm probably more focused, say, on the return. And to me, the return is into your people. So I think, in part, you know, that importance around the culture you build in your organisations, and that is important in terms of, you know, retention and attraction of talent. And I guess for organisations, it's competitive difference in terms of that talent. And as an example, actually through what Cisco did, living that as my own experience, we noticed there was a big spike in our productivity, like a lot of organisations probably through COVID, working from home. And through that, obviously realising that's probably not sustainable, the organisation committed to being able to provide this day for me for staff. So in addition to you know, the normal leave entitlements, and globally this is that every staff member now gets an additional 4 days of leave, or this day for me. So in terms of, I think it's a good demonstration of trust that sort of goes two ways. So the reward back to staff in terms of doing the right thing, and the benefits then that as an organisation the company's receiving.
Thank you. I think the primary cost actually is opportunity cost. Like, if you don't do it, what are you losing? And actually, for businesses to quantify that, I think would be incredibly hard. But actually, for me, that's the overriding. There will be practical costs, you know, from, as I said, the trial of actually, there's a time, there's a focus, create the collateral, roll it out, the systems, tracking how many have we done, etc. But yeah, it's that opportunity cost that for me is the primary, because actually, you know, with the economy as it is, winning that customer is incredibly important. Brand switching is happening more and more. The cost of acquiring a customer is going up and up. Just ask all of the online-only players. Like, all of the cost per click, etc., has gone through the roof. So actually, that retention, that building that deep loyalty, so actually anchoring on the opportunity cost would be my recommendation.
The only thing I would add is the way that we measure the return, let's start there, is retention. So we can very, very clearly see that even in really difficult market right now, I don't know if any of you have gotten your insurance bill lately, prices are really high, costs have gone up, and we look at retention very carefully. So retention is one, and also what is the premium that we would seek because we are more trusted, and we can measure that. We see that and can measure it very finely. So are we receiving a premium for people to stay with us and to win new business? But then a notion that hasn't been picked up yet, and that is, you know, one of the things that RACQ does isn't just focus on the member. We also look at the collective good, and the community work we do is phenomenal. I mean, we have armies of people that go out and plant grasses. We'll be in Gympie in 2 weeks' time trying to repair the Mary River because of their flooding issues. We're going into remote areas like Blackhall, and we're just going to help farmers who've experienced huge drought and paint their house. So some of this stuff that's maybe not seen, but it is hugely felt. And so again, it's that collective community work. I mean, I've got Nadia sitting in the back there. She heads up our media team. every day of the week she's fighting for all of you for fair fuel. Every day of the week, our advocacy team is fighting for better roads, safer roads. We educate 55,000 kids to be safe near and on the road. All of that, I think, adds up. And I think that's why you can sit back and as we monitor our reputation and our NPS, that trust builds over time. But that has been happening for 100 years they've been doing it. So I just thought I'd add that little color in there.
Maybe add one last question to your answer, because when we were researching for our paper, we were really had time to find examples of benevolence. It's not really public, so I think it's really inspiring what you're doing, and it's probably well documented. But for the most of companies that we looked up, it's not well documented. Do you find, or do you have any explanation for that? Is it the fear that customer may be exploited, or do you think it's just not systematically implemented into an organization or the most organizations?
I think most organizations try to do more good than not, right? And I think that we probably don't have a good system in collecting it all. I mean, even after developing the first For the Greater Good report last year, after we went, we're done, publish, I then discovered a whole bunch of other things we were doing. I went, oh, we'll pick it up next year. So I do actually think there isn't a clear mechanism in organizations to capture the good.
Yep.
And we've got to get better at measuring it. And it's a really hard one because the more empowerment you have, the more it's happening every day in real time. But then what is the system that captures and documents so you can measure the impact of it? And that's the bit that's missing for us as well. So we can do much better.